Northern Italy, April 15, 1945, the bunker door opened with a metallic groan, and Corporal James Mitchell saw her collapse against the concrete wall, skeletal hands clawing at nothing. Her uniform hung like canvas on a wire frame, gray eyes sunken into hollow sockets, breath shallow and rattling. She tried to stand, tried to salute, tried to maintain some thread of dignity, even as her body surrendered to months of starvation. He knelt beside her, opened his canteen, brought water to lips, cracked and bleeding. "Easy now," he said in broken German. "You're mine now, under my protection. Nobody's going to hurt you." Before we continue this remarkable story of humanity emerging from the ashes of war, if you're finding value in these forgotten chapters of history, please hit that like button and subscribe, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from this world that needs to remember what mercy looks like. Those words, "you're mine now," would echo across decades, across continents, across the vast distance between enemies and friends. And in that moment, lying on cold Italian ground, Katharina Becker understood something the propaganda had never told her: that Americans could choose compassion when cruelty would have been easier. The 88th Infantry Division had been fighting through Italy since November 1944, part of the Fifth Army's grinding campaign northward through mountain ranges that favored defense. By April 1945, the spring offensive Operation Grapeshot was dismantling what remained of German resistance. Bologna would fall on April 21st. The Po Valley beyond lay open. But on April 15th, isolated German positions still dotted the landscape like forgotten islands, their garrisons cut off, their supply lines severed, their futures uncertain. Mitchell's squad was clearing these pockets. Routine work in a war that was ending in fragments. Most positions surrendered without fighting. Some vanished into civilian populations. A few held on out of discipline or confusion about what else to do. Communication Station 7 sat camouflaged into a hillside, reinforced concrete and steel netting, built to coordinate radio traffic for forces that no longer existed. 7 people remained, 5 male operators, 2 female auxiliaries. They debated surrender for days, their food dwindling, their orders silent, their isolation complete. By April 15th, they were eating the last of their rations. Hard biscuits from 1942 that barely qualified as food. Tinned meat that tasted like rust. The water supply was adequate, but water doesn't sustain life when the body has begun consuming itself. Katharina Becker was 26, from a small town near Stuttgart. Educated enough to work communications, but not essential enough to be evacuated when everything collapsed. She'd lost 15 kilograms in 3 months. Her uniform hung like tent canvas. Her hair had started falling out. Her body had stopped menstruating. She wasn't dying yet, but she was approaching the threshold where not dying required more resources than were available. When Mitchell's squad approached the bunker, Sergeant Klaus Weber made his choice. Better to surrender to Americans than starve in darkness. He emerged with hands raised. But when Katharina tried to follow, her legs failed. She collapsed on the gravel, unable to rise. Her pulse was weak, her skin cold, her eyes glassy with advanced malnutrition. Mitchell reacted instantly. He handed his rifle to Private Cohen, knelt beside her, and checked for injuries. What he found instead was the unmistakable outline of starvation, muscle wasted, fat gone, organs beginning to fail. "Jesus," Cohen muttered, "she's starving." Mitchell lifted her head and offered water. She drank desperately before coughing. He drew the canteen back. "Easy. You're mine now, under my protection." The other Germans tensed, misreading the phrasing. until Cohen clarified in better German, he means U.S. military protection. Mitchell barely heard. Her pulse fluttered like bird wings beneath his fingers. She weighed almost nothing when he carried her to the jeep. At the battalion aid station, set up in a commandeered farmhouse, Sergeant Rivera looked up with concern. Put her there. He checked vitals and shook his head. 40 kilos, maybe less. Severe protein deficiency, dehydration. They had to reintroduce food slowly. Too much, too fast could trigger refeeding syndrome, where the body, overwhelmed after prolonged starvation, collapses under the strain of rescue itself. The first medical reports of refeeding syndrome had appeared in The Lancet in 1945, documenting deaths among liberated prisoners of war and concentration camp survivors who'd been fed too quickly. Dutch authorities had observed it during the 5-month Nazi siege that began in November 1944. Far East POWs, liberated from Japanese camps, had died within days of rescue, their hearts stopping as their bodies struggled to process sudden abundance. Captain Friedman came over to examine Katharina. "She's on the edge," he said quietly. "Could go either way. Broth, small amounts, frequent intervals. Too much, too fast, will kill her." He looked at Mitchell. "You brought her in. Good work." Most guys would have just marched her to the prisoner collection point and let her collapse there, just doing what seemed right. "Sir, you planning to stay here all day?" "If that's allowed, sir. Want to make sure she pulls through?" Friedman exchanged a glance with Rivera, some unspoken communication passing between them. Finally, "Fine, but you stay out of the way." Hours passed. The aid station treated other patients' minor injuries, infections, exhaustion cases. Mitchell sat in his corner, watching Katharina sleep fitfully, occasionally stirring but never waking fully. Around 6 in the evening, Rivera brought broth, thin chicken stock with tiny pieces of vegetable. He woke Katharina gently, speaking in rudimentary German. "You must eat small amounts." Slowly, she woke, confused, frightened, trying to sit up and failing. Rivera supported her, brought the bowl to her lips. She drank eagerly, too eagerly. "Slow," Rivera insisted, pulling the bowl back. "Too fast, and you'll vomit." Mitchell stood, moved closer. "Let me—" Rivera looked skeptical but handed him the bowl. Mitchell knelt beside the cot. "Katharina," he said, using her first name without considering whether it was appropriate. "You need to drink this slowly. I know you're hungry, but if you drink too fast, it'll make you sick. Understand?" She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. Her eyes were gray, sunken, but intelligent, aware. "You are the soldier," she said in heavily accented English. "From the bunker, yes. I brought you here to get help." "Why?" The question was direct, genuine. "Why help enemy?" Mitchell thought about his answer. "Because you needed help. Because the war is almost over, and letting people die from neglect now would be wrong. Because you're a person, I am prisoner." "You're both," Mitchell said. "Right now, you're a prisoner who needs food. Here, small sips." He held the bowl while she drank, pulling it back when she tried to drink too fast, waiting while she caught her breath, then offering it again. The process took 30 minutes. She finished maybe half the bowl before exhaustion claimed her, and she slept again. Evening turned to night. The aid station quieted. Mitchell stayed. He told himself it was to ensure Katharina received proper care. He told himself it was duty, responsibility, completing the commitment he'd made when he told her she was under his protection. But sitting in the dark aid station, watching her sleep restlessly, he acknowledged something more complicated. She She reminded him of his sister. Similar age, similar intelligence in her eyes. Helping her felt necessary in ways that transcended military obligation. Around midnight, she woke crying out in German. Nightmare. Mitchell moved to her side, spoke quietly. You're safe. You're in an American aid station. No one will hurt you. She looked at him, disoriented. Where am I? Medical facility. You collapsed. We're treating you, the others. Sergeant Weber. They're fine. They'll be sent to a collection point, then probably to a camp in the United States. You too, once you're strong enough to travel. She absorbed this. America, we will go to America. Probably. It's a long way from the fighting. Safe. You'll be treated fairly, the propaganda said. Americans treat prisoners badly. That you have no mercy. Propaganda lied about a lot of things, Mitchell said. We treat prisoners according to the Geneva Convention. Food, shelter, medical care, fair work assignments, no mistreatment. You are kind, she said quietly. When you said you're mine now, the others thought you meant something bad, but I understood you meant protection. Mitchell felt embarrassed. Yeah, sorry if the phrasing was confusing. I meant you were under U.S. military custody, safe from harm. Thank you, Katharina said, for the food, for the care, for seeing me as a person, not just enemy. They talked through the night about their lives before the war. He'd been a machinist in Cleveland, working in a factory that made car parts. She'd been a secretary in Stuttgart, working for an insurance company. Normal people with normal lives before circumstance and ideology had thrown them into uniforms. What will you do when war ends? She asked. Go home, go back to the factory, probably get married. I've got a girl back in Ohio. Try to forget as much of this as I can, and me. What will I do? Whatever you want, rebuild. Find your family if they survived. Get work, live your life. If anyone hires women who served in German military, they will, Mitchell said with more confidence than he felt. Germany will need workers. Everyone who survived will need to rebuild. Morning brought Captain Friedman making rounds. He checked Katharina's vitals, examined her condition, nodded with satisfaction. She's stabilizing. Pulse is stronger. Color's better. Keep feeding her small amounts every 2 hours. He looked at Mitchell, who was asleep in a chair beside the cot. He stay all night. Yes, sir, Rivera confirmed. Wouldn't leave. Throughout the day, Mitchell helped care for Katharina, fed her broth every 2 hours, helped her to the latrine when she was strong enough to walk, averting his eyes, giving her privacy, supporting her weight when she stumbled. Sat with her during the long hours between meals, talking about everything and nothing. On the third day, new orders came. All prisoners in the sector were to be consolidated at a central collection point near Florence, then transported to port facilities for eventual shipment to camps in the United States. Processing needed to happen quickly. The war was ending. Demobilization was starting. Captain Friedman pulled Mitchell aside. Your prisoner is stable enough to travel. She needs continued feeding, but she can handle transport if it's done carefully. Will she be all right? Will they keep feeding her properly? That's not your concern anymore, Corporal. She's no longer your responsibility. Sir, I want to escort her. Make sure she arrives safely. Make sure whoever takes custody understands her medical condition. Friedman studied him. Why? Why does this particular prisoner matter so much to you? Mitchell struggled to articulate it. Because I told her she'd be safe. Because I found her and I feel responsible. Because she reminds you of someone, Friedman supplied. Sister, girlfriend, someone back home you're trying to save by proxy. Maybe, Mitchell admitted. I don't know. I just know I can't leave her now. Not until I'm sure she's going to be okay. Friedman sighed. All right, you can escort her to the collection point. But that's it. Once she's there, you turn around and come back. Understood? Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. The next morning, Mitchell drove Katharina to the collection point in a jeep. She sat beside him, wrapped in a blanket, clutching a small bag containing her few possessions. They drove through Italian countryside, showing signs of war and recovery, both bombed buildings being repaired, fields being replanted, people returning to villages. It's beautiful, Katharina said, looking at hills covered with olive trees. I forgot things could be beautiful. You've been in a bunker for months, Mitchell replied. Everything looks beautiful after that. When they reached the collection point, a former Italian military barracks, now filled with hundreds of German prisoners, awaiting processing, Mitchell helped Katharina from the jeep. She could walk now without support, though she was still weak, still skeletal, still months from full recovery. He escorted her to the processing desk, explained her medical condition to the sergeant in charge. The sergeant barely listened, already overwhelmed by the volume of prisoners arriving daily. She be fed 3 times a day, the sergeant said dismissively. Medical personnel check everyone. She'll be fine. She needs continued careful feeding, Mitchell insisted. Too much too fast will damage her. I said, we'll take care of it, Corporal. You're dismissed. Mitchell looked at Katharina. She looked back at him, something unspoken passing between them. Thank you, she said in English, for everything, for seeing me as human, for keeping promise, for being good man in bad war. You're welcome, Mitchell replied. Good luck, Katharina. Find your family. Rebuild. Be happy. And you? Go home to your girl. Be happy also. Forget war if you can. He wanted to say more, wanted to ensure she'd be all right, that the system would care for her as he had, but he'd done all he could. The rest was beyond his control. He turned and walked back to the jeep, drove away without looking back, though he wanted to. Behind him, Katharina stood in a crowd of prisoners, watching until the jeep disappeared, carrying with her the memory of an enemy soldier who'd shown mercy when mercy wasn't required. Katharina spent 3 weeks at the collection point before transport to America. The feeding was less careful than what Mitchell had provided, but adequate. In June, she boarded a ship at Naples, along with 800 other prisoners. The voyage took 2 weeks. They landed at Norfolk, Virginia, were processed through facilities that felt impersonal but efficient, then transported by train to Camp Ruston, Louisiana. Camp Ruston was one of the largest prisoner-of-war camps in the United States, with 4,315 prisoners at its peak in October 1943. The camp sprawled across 770 acres, built by the local T.L. James Company, complete with barracks, administrative offices, workshops, and recreational facilities. Conditions were decent by any standard. Food was adequate, work was available, but the boredom was crushing, the uncertainty worse. Across the United States, 425,000 German prisoners lived in 700 camps during World War II. They picked cotton, felled timber, built roads, performed labor to help solve the domestic shortage caused by war mobilization. Under the Geneva Convention, enlisted prisoners were required to work. Officers were not. Treatment varied by camp, but most followed international protocols. Food, shelter, medical care, no mistreatment. Katharina worked in the camp administrative office, filing documents. Her education and language skills made her valuable. The work was mind-numbing, but better than physical labor she wasn't yet strong enough to handle. She thought often about Mitchell, his patience, kindness, an insistence on treating her as human. His words stayed with her that she was under his protection, that mercy mattered more than vengeance, that she could rebuild. In August, Germany surrendered. The war ended. Prisoners listened to broadcasts with relief and dread. Relief that fighting stopped, dread of what came next. In September, the Red Cross informed Katharina that her parents had survived and were living outside Stuttgart. Her brother had died in Russia. Her sister had married an American soldier and was immigrating to the United States. Relief and grief tangled. Everything familiar was gone. In October 1945, she wrote a letter to Corporal James Mitchell, care of the 88th Infantry Division. She didn't know if it would reach him, but she needed to thank him. After months of forwarding, it reached Mitchell in January 1946. He was home in Cleveland, working at the factory, engaged, rebuilding his life. He read her letter 3 times, then wrote back. They corresponded sporadically for 2 years. Mitchell married in 1946. Katharina was repatriated the same year and reunited with her parents. Their letters grew infrequent. Mitchell had 2 children. Katharina worked as a translator and married a school teacher in 1950. Her final letter, in 1952, told him she was pregnant and had named her husband Jakobe, one who protects. She thanked Mitchell for teaching her that protection and decency mattered. He kept the letter in his desk, rereading it when the world felt harsh. In 1985, Mitchell, now retired, received a visitor, Jakob Richter, Katharina's son. "My mother told me about you," he said. "She asked me to thank you one final time." They talked about her life, her gratitude, her belief that humanity could survive war through individual mercy. Jakob gave Mitchell a final letter Katharina had written before her death, thanking him for saving her life and showing her dignity. Mitchell wept as he read it. Mitchell died in 1998. Among his belongings, his children found Katharina's letters and a small notebook. In a 1975 entry, he reflected on how choosing mercy in that bunker had shaped his beliefs that wars truly end not through treaties, but when individuals decide to treat enemies with decency. Katharina lived because he chose kindness, and her children and grandchildren learned mercy because she survived. For Mitchell, this was the only victory that mattered, the proof that humanity endures when people decide to preserve it, one quiet act of compassion at a time, even when no one expects it.